Welcome to the Sargassum Champions course. You are currently tuning into one of the videos produced for this course. Funding for the course comes from the Resilience, Sustainable Energy and Marine Biodiversity Program, RESENBID, financed under the 11th European Development Fund, EDF, Caribbean Overseas Countries and Territories Regional Program. RESENBID is being implemented by Expertise France, with the primary stakeholders being the 12 Caribbean overseas countries and territories. Let's get ready to learn together.
Welcome everybody to today's lesson on the Sargassum Champions course. Today we are going to talk about how you can detect sargassum from space and how you can use this satellite data to make predictions about when the sargassum will land on your beaches or your coastlines. We have two experts with us today. Both of them work on satellite detection. With us is Marion Sutton, she is an oceanographer and project manager at the Environmental Applications Department of Collecte Localisation Satellites, or CLS for short. And also with us is Dr. Geoff Smith, who works for Spectro Natura, which is at the interface between users, service providers, and technology developers. The project he works on is Sargassum, which is a new service to provide reliable, actionable, near real-time information to the sargassum downstream industry sector. Welcome, Marion, and welcome, Geoff, and thank you so much for helping us explain how this work is done.
Okay. Hello. Thank you, Francesca. Hi, Geoff. So I will start this session by a short introduction on how do satellites monitor sargassum. Just a short slide to introduce why we will be discussing about how to monitor sargassum. First question is actually who needs to monitor sargassum, and you can imagine that there's plenty of sectors that actually need to monitor sargassum, either for the bad impact on the environment or on activities, but also for a positive effect of the sargassum. So public authorities needs to understand and monitor the sargassum arrivals because they have the mandate in public health and public beach management. They are in charge of cleaning beaches and monitor the H2S concentration. The tourism sector is really impacted by the sargassum influx, which is a key source of revenue for most countries. Fisheries are also impacted by sargassum. They can be hampered by floating sargassum. They can also be trapped in port by sargassum, prevented to go offshore for going fishing. Operations at sea and marine safety is also impacted. Small size vessels, sailing boats can be trapped in sargassum mats. But on the other side, the sargassum, when it's floating on the open ocean, offers wildlife protection for juveniles such as turtles, and it can be also collected for valorization. So how to monitor sargassum? There is a need to answer all these needs to monitor the situation at Atlantic basin and also island scales. And for this, the satellite technology and drift models are key tools to help mitigation. It's helped to anticipate the size and the timing on influxes to correctly size the responses. And Geoff, I give you the floor now for the more details on the satellite detection.
Okay, thank you, Marion. Well, I'll be talking about the sort of technology that sits behind our monitoring of Sargassum. And in this case, we're going to focus on what's referred to as optical Earth observation, which uses light that has been sent from the sun and is reflected from the surface of the Earth or the surface of the ocean and is collected by a satellite. So here's just a kind of schematic to show what is happening. So the satellite is traveling through an orbit which describes a path on the surface of the Earth, and along that path images are then collected in different spectral wave bands. So these are different colors of light that are reflected from the surface. And so those are recorded in the satellite and then transmitted down and formed into images that we can then convert into information about Sargassum. These different coloured bands that are recorded by the satellite, they tell us different bits of information about the surface. And so here we have a diagram which just generally shows us what is happening in the blue, green, red and near infrared parts of the spectrum. The near infrared is beyond our visual sight, but we can record it with electronic instruments. And so what we can see here are graphs that show how different surface features or different types of materials respond in those different regions. And we can see that healthy vegetation has a strong response in the near infrared region. And we can also see that it has a small peak in the green region, and that is why we always see healthy vegetation as being green. But we have also, there's absorption features in the blue and the red, which are related to different pigments in the vegetation, which are then used as the drivers for photosynthesis. But we can also see some other spectra there. We see that soil has quite a flat spectra with quite low reflectance. And also importantly for us, we see that water has a very low reflectance and that it tails off to almost zero in the near infrared, where it actually absorbs all the light from the sun that's falling on it and does not reflect any back. And we'll be using these properties then as a means of detecting sargassum floating in water. And if we look in more detail now, when we have two spectra here, again, one for clear water, so clean water. So this is water with very little sediment or algae or dissolved organic matter in it. We can see that we have a very low reflectance value, and that again it tails off into the near infrared region beyond about 700 nanometers. And then we can also see a spectra for algae, and we can see that that's very different, and it has this absorption around 400 to 500, which is related to the pigments, and then it starts to have an increased reflectance, but then because of the influence of the water, it then tails off itself into the near infrared. So what we've done, or not myself personally, but researchers in the field, we've developed an index that can actually be used to use these different shapes of these curves in order to identify where there is floating algae in the water. And this is interestingly called the Floating Algal Index, so FAI. And this uses some of those features that we've just talked about for vegetation and water. And so what it's doing, it takes red light and near infrared light, and then a region which is just beyond the red area, which we refer to as the red edge. And so we need three images, effectively, three different colors. And what the approach does is it creates a gradient between the red and the near infrared, and then measures the distance between that line and the top of the red edge peak. And where we have algae in the water, that difference there becomes larger, and so that amplifies the signal related to sargassum and allows us to map it in more detail. And in the project I've been working on, which is called Sargassum, we've used some images from a company called Planet. They have an image collection service called PlanetScope. and their satellites are called super doves, and they have 8 wave bands. And so what I've got here is just a comparison between a couple of comparison between a very standard index, the normalized difference vegetation index, which is used enormously in land monitoring, and the floating algal index. And just to show that all of these indicators can actually be produced from these different satellite sensors. And so on the right hand side you can then see that these are the band numbers of the bands from the instrument that we're using in order to calculate the values we require. And another, so once we can measure these different color properties of the imagery, the next controlling factor is the actual size of the pixels on the ground. So an image is made up of rows and columns of pixels, and the size of these pixels obviously can have a huge impact on the amount of mapping we're able to do, how accurate that can be, and how relevant it can be for certain areas. So we have here 4 images, which were originally derived from the same very detailed image, the 0.5 meter image here, and have just been resampled and scaled to show what the effect would be of changing what we refer to as spatial resolution or pixel size on the ground. And we can see that going from 0.5 meters to 3 meters, there's very little change in relation to the sort of things we're looking at here. So this is a coastal resort area. We can see some bright blue areas which are swimming pools. The red area is vegetation. It's the trees and vegetation around the complex. And the white areas are bare ground and beaches. And the dark area is the water. And we can see in the edge of the water there, if you look close enough, some slightly blurred, fuzzy looking blobs just floating near the beach. And that is areas of sargassum just sat in the water there. So we can see that we're picking up the red here is the near infrared signal, so we're picking up some information about the vegetation there. Oh, sorry, the sargassum there. But as we move to 10-meter resolution, you can see that our description of the surface starts to break down a little bit. We can't quite see those swimming pools as clear as we could, or the buildings. We can just about see those patches of sargassum, but they're becoming more difficult to interpret. And then when we go to 300 meters pixels, you can see that we've completely changed the description of the surface area there. But what's important to say here, that these different spatial resolutions, these different pixel sizes, are very useful for different aspects of mapping sargassum. So whether we're mapping on a beach where we might want very detailed information, as the band of sargassum might only be a few meters wide, whereas if we're looking at the whole basin level, the sort of the whole Caribbean level in the ocean there, then 300 meters would be very useful, because then that allows us to cover a very large area within a small number of images. And I'm sure Marion will explain this as we move forwards. The final aspect of monitoring sargassum is what we refer to as temporal resolution, or the frequency with which we acquire images. As you'll know, sargassum is a very dynamic feature in the ocean, and it can change on a daily basis or even on a tidal basis, as different blocks of sargassum are washed, mats of sargassum are washed into the shore, etc. So a key function is how often can we record images. And another confounding factor on that is the presence of clouds, which interfere with our optical images. So we cannot see through clouds, or, well, we can see, as you can see on this animation, we can just about see through some quite thin clouds, but there are times when the cloud actually obscures the area we're looking at. So we have to think of that as well when we're building our systems. So this example here shows some results from the Copernicus Sentinel-2 system, and which acquires images of the Caribbean every 5 days. And you can see that over this short period, which is about a month, I think, or just 2 months, that we have some clear images and we have some cloudy images, and some partially cloudy images that we then have to filter and crop out to remove the the effects of the cloud. So I'm going to finish up by just showing you an example of our Sargassum system working. So again, this is an animation. These are 3 dates. These are consecutive dates, as you can see from the time ticking over at the top of the display there. Because we were using this planet system, the super doves collect an image of every point on the ground once every day. So rather than the 5-day interval of the Sentinel data, we have a 1-day repeat here and a 3-meter spatial resolution. So it gives us very detailed temporal and spatial information at the coast, but it's too detailed to actually work at the whole basin scale. And so this particular application is targeted very much at tactical management of sargassum actually on the beaches and in nearshore waters. So I'll now hand over to Marion, who will tell us more about the mapping work that they do at a very different scale and with a very different approach, including modelling. So I'll now hand over. Thank you.
Thank you, Geoff, for this presentation. It's very interesting, and also what I will continue on will explain what are the other complementary information that we can find using a synergy of satellite sensors. So indeed, we have developed a system, an operational system, since 2018, relying on satellite sensors. But there are more, as you mentioned, satellites that using coarser resolution from 300 meters to 20 meters, and it allows us to get different size and different scale of information, which is also very valuable for the monitoring of sargassum. So the first satellite sensors or types of satellite sensors that we are using are ocean color satellite instruments with white swaths. To mention them, we talk about MODIS sensor on board the Aqua satellite from the NASA. We talk about OC sensor on board the European Sentinel-3A and Sentinel-3B satellites. These satellites are allowed to take an image on a daily basis, so 1 image every day. And it allows also to get an extended coverage of the full Atlantic basin at 300 meters pixel every day. So you can see on the right, on the bottom right, you have the coverage shown by MODIS or OC, showing all the area which is covered from the Gulf of Guinea to Gulf of Mexico, and on a daily basis. So we get an image every day on all this area. We also combine this data from OC and MODIS at 1 kilometer scale, pixel scale. This is the image that you see on the top, and this also allows to get an overview of the situation, and also with merging these 7 days of data, it allows to get rid of the remaining clouds, so we are sure that we visualize every pixel of the ocean to get a sense on where are the sargassum or where were the sargassum for the past week, and it provides a statistical approach and more like overview of where to find sargassum in a particular week. So the main inconvenience with these satellites, we've mentioned already, is that they are sensible to cloud cover, and that's why we also combine several of them. But the positive point is that they allow to get a general overview of the overall situation in the whole Atlantic, and we get a detection every day. So to complete these wide swath medium range sensors, we also use what we call high-resolution optical sensors. So these are, for example, the Sentinel-2 that was mentioned before. So on Sentinel-2, 8 and Sentinel-2B, we have the sensor called MSI. We also use 2 other satellites from the NASA again, Landsat 8 and Landsat 9. With these satellites, high-resolution optical sensors, we can monitor and detect the sargassum at finer resolution at 20-meter pixel resolution, which when you see on the bottom right image, some big Sargassum aggregation or Sargassum mats floating offshore Barbados. So the Sargassum are shown in red, and you have the cloud cover or the missing data from the sensor in gray. So at the island scale and global management scale, it allows to get information at a very precise information at 20-meter resolution. But this data is not available in the full Atlantic, so it today covers areas closer to land. It's up to 300 kilometers from the coast, so it's still enough to get valuable information. And you can see on the bottom, on the top right, the red squares that shows where this satellite data, high resolution satellite data, is actually acquired at every pass, a satellite pass, and processed to get the satellite Sargassum detection. So again, the inconvenience of these sensors is that they are sensible to cloud cover. But the good thing is that they allow to complete the detection from the medium range sensor, and it allows to refine the shapes of the maps when we have the images. But you get an image every 2 to 3 days on a given area, while the medium range were on a daily basis. So again, to complete, we also have another type of sensor. This one is a geostationary radiometric sensor. So the sensor it's called ABI onboard Goeff 16. So contrary to the previous one, which were sun-synchronous satellites, where they go over one area every day or every 2 to 3 days with what we call a revisit time, the geostationary stays over the same area. And the good thing is then it takes pictures every 15 minutes. So when you see on the top right, you get sample of the ocean every 15 minutes. So you can see the cloud moving. And so at the end of the day, you can compose a daily image and take out or clean on the majority of the cloud cover, and you are able to obtain a more complete map of the situation on a daily basis. So the advantage of this satellite is just it increases the satellite coverage for better monitoring in time, although it's available with a coarser resolution of 1 kilometer. And this is still an experimental sensor, so there is still some improvement work to do for a better denoising. So to summarize, why is it important also to get and to use the synergy of satellite sensors? They all have different advantages and all different inconveniences, and the use of multiple sensors allow to get the most complete scene. So you get from small scale features for short-term monitoring, which is provided by Sentinel-2 on 20 meters pixel, so fine resolution, and you go to large-scale situation with the 1 kilometer provided by Goeff 16, by ABI, by the geostationary satellite, and this is good for long-term monitoring. So when you compare this, the same situation seen by these three satellites, so you see on the left, Sargassum mats seen by Sentinel-2 on 20-meter pixel resolution, when you have a lot of details in the mats. The same situation seen by Sentinel-3 in the middle, where you lose a bit of the situation, but it also completes the advantages, like you will get an image every day. So Sentinel-2 is only completing the information every 2 to 3 days. And on the right, you have the same feature seen by Goeff with a daily merged product, where all the same feature is seen, but with less accuracy and less details. But it allows to have more information on daily, on cloudy days, and to follow several days the same features. So when we have all this detection, so what we do, so in the system that we have developed, which is named called SAM tool, based on the latest detection that we obtain from the satellites, from all the satellites that we are processing on every day, daily basis, we add some drift modeling of the detected mass and estimation of landing. So we are using a drift model which has been specifically set up to respond to the drift of Sargassum raft. So using some wind data and current data to represent the drift of the Sargassum mass, and we are providing some forecasts of these trajectories. So you can do with a drift model, you can do short-term predictions, so up to 3 to 5 days in coastal areas. And the objective is really to provide some probability of immediate landing. So on this animation, you see that the Sargassum are detected in black. The black dots are the position of the detection of Sargassum. And then you provide the estimation of the trajectory. Shown with the white lines, and you see the expected or estimated beaches of landing with the red dots on the coast. With models, we can also do some seasonal forecasting, and this is more used to do long-term predictions at basin scales. And for this, we are partnering with the IRD and Mercator Ocean International in a project funded by DESCO, Space Climate Observatory. And in this project, the IRD is going to put in operational the seasonal forecast model using the satellite data that they obtain on daily basis that we will provide to them. So with this, you will be able also to get long-term overview and long-term prediction at basin scales to anticipate the next seasons of Sargassum influxes.
Thank you both for this presentation. I think you did a really clear job of explaining it so that even I understand it, and hopefully also our course participants. And Sargassum prediction is very interesting and very useful, I think, and very needed. And unfortunately, with the clouds, we sometimes cannot predict it perfectly. And it's not a perfect tool, but it is super, super helpful. And all the hard work you guys have been doing just to make these models and make these predictions in a way that people who aren't experts can look at these maps and understand it. I think it's fantastic. And just for our listeners to know and for our course participants to know, there has been years of work going into getting these predictions in the form that we get them now, and lots of money from grants and from organizations have moved into this. So we are very fortunate that this all happened. And I'm very excited that both of you came on and shared with us on how this is working and shared what you are doing with the satellites. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in today and learning with us from experts in the Sargassum field. This course is made possible through funding by the Resilience, Sustainable Energy and Marine Biodiversity Program, RESNBID, financed under the 11th European Development Fund, EDF, Caribbean Overseas Countries and Territories Regional Program. RESNBID is being implemented by Expertise France, with the primary stakeholders being the 12 Caribbean Overseas Countries and Territories. The course was designed by Franziska Elmer and Evelyn Salas, and the videos were produced by Marcel van der Kamp.